E aí, galera, que saudade de vocês, mas hoje eu só vim aqui dar uma passada rapidinha para mostrar para vocês o relançamento, na verdade, do grande parceiro aqui da Meeple TV, Inteligências Lúdicas, com o Rodrigo, Manique e LePe Salgado, que estão voltando a mandar entrevistas aqui pra gente e vão reestrear hoje aqui na nossa programação com uma entrevista com o Tony Fanchi, que é o designer da nova expansão do Orla exterior. Bem legal, né? Então fique ligado, não deixe de assinar também lá o Inteligências Lúdicas, o link vai estar aqui na descrição do vídeo também, tá, galera? E também chamar vocês para dizer que o nosso projeto lá na Galápagos já está rolando. Então, vou deixar o link na descrição também do canal da Galápagos. Se vocês conhecerem, já lançou o primeiro vídeo. Essa semana agora vai ter novidades. Toda terça e quinta tem novidades. Espero também que vai ter uma quarta-feira também que a gente está fazendo um podcast muito legal. São 5 programas novos, rapidinhos, com propostas diferentes. E eu adoraria ter o feedback de vocês lá também. Então, fique ligado nas novidades. E o link está aqui embaixo, galera. Um beijão para todo mundo e a gente vai se falando em todas as redes. Valeu, bom programa para vocês.
Bem-vindos a Inteligências Lúdicas. Meu nome é Rodrigo Manique, estou aqui com o meu brother LePe.
Olá, galera.
E here we have again with us Tony Fanchi. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you again.
Thank you for joining us. And we have so many things to ask you today. LePe here, at last, he has the opportunity to talk with you. And so let's see some, Tony, I never thought being a smuggler or a bounty hunter could be so fun. I never thought that. And after taking after a job or hunt someone, deliver a cargo, improve your ability, among other things, everything inside a box that once you open, it drives you to a galaxy far, far away. And this box brings us. And now with this expansion, we are really very excited to see what is waiting for us. But first, are you a fan of Star Wars?
Of course. I grew up being a big fan of Star Wars. Some of my earliest memories are going to see the special edition in the theaters. One of my first tabletop gaming experiences was with the Star Wars card game back in the 90s. And so I've been a fan all my life of Star Wars.
And tell me, what did you feel the moment you received the idea for the first game, the expansion, or was it something that you were already working on?
So the expansion, I'm trying to think. So I think it was 2019, the end of 2019, that Corey Knitska, my co-designer on Unfinished Business, started the design on Unfinished Business. And then I joined him in early 2020, right before the pandemic struck. And so I was really excited to be able to work on an expansion for this game. I was very proud of the base game, but I felt that there was definitely lots more room to explore in the Star Wars galaxy. So I was very excited to be able to bring in an expansion with Unfinished Business.
The core game was released in 2019, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So you started working on it in some time before it. So when you started to doing the expansion, did you try to get back to the mindset that you were at the time, or you try to tackle the project with new fresh eyes?
A little of both. So one thing that I think people don't often know is that by the time the game reaches the public, the designers have been done designing it for somewhere between like 9 months and a year. There's a long lag time between when we finish a design and when it actually gets into the hands of players. Corey started the expansion design probably about 6 months after the game was released in public. And that was great because we actually had that time to be receiving fan feedback and seeing what fans liked and didn't like about the game. In the past, in order to get an expansion out like the year after the base game, we would often have to design the expansion before the actual base game actually got into the hands of players. So we didn't often know what the weak points in the game were, or the things that were needing a little bit of polish. So having that time to actually see the fan reactions to the base game of Outer Rim was great in informing the direction that we took with Unfinished Business.
Oh, so it's a lot of work. And how hard is to take it to the game how hard is it to take a game as thematic as Star Wars Outer Rim and have it to improve upon that?
It's actually not very hard, because there's so much in the Star Wars galaxy that we can pour into the game, and so we have lots and lots of things to pull ideas from, and lots of different thematic elements that we can weave into the game. One of the things that we wanted to do in the expansion was to make the end game a little bit more of a story, a little bit more tense. And so that's where something new called ambitions comes into the game. These are new, they are an optional rule, so you don't have to use them. But what they are is they create kind of a backstory, a set of goals that you want to achieve for your character in order to win the game. So you might want to become a hero of the rebellion, or a servant of the emperor, or a pirate monarch. And so those will give you different objectives that you have to achieve in order to win the game, including a very last objective that you must achieve after you've reached your fame threshold in order to actually win the game. So it creates an end game where you're not just delivering your cargo, your illegal cargo, to get your last fame and the game is over. You actually have to go in, do a job, fight a fight, something like that makes that final turn of the game a lot more exciting.
So you created new content, like new characters, new missions for a game that already has lots of characters and missions.
Mm-hmm.
And you also created new additional rules, new optional rules for the game.
Mm-hmm.
What was the greatest challenge? To add upon already round up game that works fine, and having to put more characters, more missions that make sense in that context, or creating new rules without breaking the game balance? What was the greatest challenge?
I mean, all of those things present their different challenges. Obviously, introducing new things like playable characters, we need to make sure that they're competitive with the base game characters, that nobody's too strong or too weak. We also have to make sure that they explore new routes, new strategic elements of the game without feeling too similar to an existing character. Adding new rules, adding things like the ambitions that I talked about, those were very difficult in balancing, because you had lots of different elements to take into consideration, like how suited was the character you chose to your ambition, because different ambitions will be easier with certain characters because of the skills they require, the combat savvy that they require, things like that. So balance is certainly one of the most difficult parts of any board game, particularly any competitive game like Outer Rim. So that was probably the biggest challenge, was just making sure the balance is maintained with everything in the expansion.
How important is fan feedback, since it's almost a new experience? You had the opportunity to work with fan feedback, and there was any surprise, mechanic that you think, oh, that's good, but the people liked even more than you imagine?
So fan feedback is very big. I mean, we don't want to make a game that nobody likes to play, and so we're always interested in receiving feedback on what things people like and what things they don't like, so that we can improve those elements of the game. In terms of something surprising that players liked, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. One thing that I saw a lot of feedback on that players maybe didn't like as much was they wanted to have more interaction between players, more ways of interacting with their opponents. And so that was one element of the base game that we tried to play up in Unfinished Business, introducing a lot more elements that allow different players to interact with each other. We have certain characters like Dengar and Hondo Onaka who have built-in abilities that let them be very interactive with other players. We have a number of encounter cards that let you interact with other players in various ways. We have jobs that you can either do in cooperation with another player or in opposition of another player where you're trying to steal elements from them. And so those are all things that we added to the game to try to increase that player interaction.
The community, many hundreds, thousands of people, the community has been asking for more content of this game, right? And could you tell us more about the new content? Okay, you already said some of them, told us.
Mm-hmm.
Really exciting things. And what can expect for the expansion?
Yes, yeah. So in addition to adding some new elements to the game, I like to point out that this expansion contains more cards than the core game does. So you're basically doubling your cards in the game. We've doubled the size of every encounter deck, so you're very unlikely to see the same encounter in a few games in a row. We've increased the size of every market deck. It varies by deck how many cards were added, but in particular, like the cargo deck, that was one that I often saw cycled through several times in the game. It is now much larger and much less likely to get cycled through. Every job now has 2 different resolution cards, so you're never sure what order the tests are going to come in, whether they're going to be exactly the same experience each time around. So if you fail a job, you're not going to know that the next time this is exactly the things I'm going to have to do in this order, because there's now a 50-50 chance that it might be different in your attempt at the job. And so all of those things are there to make the replayability of the game even better.
And with the new content, there are new characters. Who can we expect? And how difficult was to introduce new mechanics, taking in consideration that it has to work with the characters from the core game and the new ones that are getting into play. And there are some elements that are new to the game, like the orange tokens and what they are for.
Sure. So the new characters, let me see if I can think of them all off the top of my head. We have Black Chrysanthemum, Cad Bane, Dengar, Enfys Nest, Maz Kanata, Harrison Dula, Hondo Onaka, and I'm missing one, Chewbacca. So a number of these characters, you might recognize their names as being contacts in the base game. So when we were coming up with our characters for the expansion, we had a bunch of characters who were contacts in the base game who we thought would be great candidates for characters in the expansion. And so that created an issue where we had to decide whether the contact tokens for those characters needed to be removed from the game during setup, or if we would just put them out on the board. We decided that because removing them from the game during setup would make bounty hunting for those colors of contacts easier, that it would be better to just have all of those contact tokens be seated on the board. And then if you reveal one as your contact, you simply remove that token from the game, and then you get to do a different encounter. So you don't lose your encounter for encountering a token of a player in the game, but you get to do something else instead. You've now gained a little bit of more information about where specific character contacts are on the board, and then you get to do a different encounter. So the orange contact tokens that you mentioned, we wanted to make all of the characters that we included in the base game people you could encounter in the game when they're not being used as characters. So those orange contacts include, I think, every playable character from the base game, plus a few more. And during setup, you're going to put one orange token on each planet on the board. So there are 11 planets on the board, so you'll have 11 orange contact tokens. We also introduced bounties for the orange contact tokens. They tend to have higher combat values, but also be worth more fame and more credits. We also gave them, many of them, crew cards. So you can earn those characters from the base game now as crew on your ship. And their crew abilities are very reminiscent of their player abilities from the core game.
And about ambitions, are ambitions mandatory, or I think you already told us that I think they're optional rule, and some servants of the emperor. And could you do us a favor? Could you tell us how favor works?
Yeah, so favors are another new addition to the expansion. They're also an optional rule like ambitions are. But the goal behind behind favors was to increase that player interactivity that I talked about before. So basically what favors do is they give players a concrete way to help each other on other players' turns. So there are, I think, 4 favors you can request. You can ask somebody for a shortcut, which gives your ship just a little bit more speed, so you can get to that destination you need. You can ask them for advice on how to do a skill test, so you can borrow a skill that they have on their character or one of their crew. You can ask them for some combat strategy, which lets you roll an additional die during any combat. Or you can ask them to endorse you with a faction, and then you get to use their positive reputation with a certain faction for your turn. So you can ask for a favor at any point during your turn, or even during other players' turns, in case you're being attacked by another player or something. But you can only receive 1 favor per turn. Now, why would you want to help out your opponents in a game? Well, you can always trade credits, so you can demand credits in return for your favor, or you can get a debt from the player. So we have new debt tokens that you can hand to another player in exchange for a favor now, and then they get to return that debt token to you for a favor in the future, and they have no say in whether you get that favor from you. So giving somebody a little favor now could be a huge boon to you in the future when you really need that one skill test to win the game. They can't say no if you have their debt tokens. So favors, I think, add a great little element of negotiation into the game, and they help to keep all the players invested in the game on every player's turn.
Wow. So remember the first question we asked you about if you love Star Wars? Now, I don't know. Of course, there's the community asking, oh, okay, but I think you read people's mind, because before the game was shown for the first time as, what if I could be someone? What if I could? Can you imagine do this? Because I read lots of books of Star Wars and movies, and as well, and many others. And I thought to myself, I think to myself, and then now you're telling us this, and wow. You cannot see me as a scanner movie, blooming, but wow, amazing. Overexcited now, and now with the Outer Rim, which is called in Brazil Orla Exterior, which is the Outer Rim. This game is more than its title says, because now there are planets closer to the core, or core planets. Could you please tell us about it and why you decided to place them as well?
Yeah, so what the core worlds are is we've replaced the end caps, the pieces that go on the ends of the semicircle board, with new end caps that have core world spaces on them. And these spaces represent that you are visiting the core worlds. So like Coruscant, Corellia, these places that are the center of the galaxy, but are also the heart of Imperial territory. So if you have negative Imperial reputation or positive Rebel reputation, it's a little more dangerous to go into the core. When you encounter one of the core worlds, you have a couple of options. You can either do a core world encounter to visit a core world, and the core worlds are great for particularly shopping. You can find anything you need basically in the core world. So if you really need that one bounty card, or you really need that one piece of gear, go into the core worlds is likely to net that for you. The other option you can do at the core worlds is you can cross the galaxy. So you'll have an encounter. It'll maybe give you a test. It'll maybe charge you some money. Or if you have positive Imperial reputation, they may just wave you through. Once you've done that encounter, you will be given the opportunity to move to the other end of the map, so that you've completely crossed the galaxy. The reason we added this is because we had found in the base game that because the board is a semicircle and there was no way to move from one end to the other, sometimes the corners of the map were a little bit less explored than normal. And so we felt that introducing a way to go from one end to the other made a lot of sense in terms of both theme and gameplay.
And we have one more question. I really love solo games. Games. And
yep.
during the pandemic, I had to try it, the game, even more, because we already had the Brazilian copy here. And how is it solo? How is the solo play? Can a solo player use all the content of the box that is in the box? What can we do play in the solo game experience?
So for the solo game, it has received I think a pretty major update with the expansion. It was something that we had added somewhat toward the end of development of the core game, and so it was not as engaging as I had maybe hoped. And so it was definitely something I wanted to address in the expansion. All of the content except for favors in the expansion are usable within the solo game. You can't ask the AI for favors because they can't decide whether that's a good idea for them or not. But we introduced the ability to play against bounty hunter characters. So in the base game, you could only play against the smuggler characters. Now we have a separate deck for the bounty hunters as well. So if you want to, you can play against one bounty hunter or one smuggler, or you can play against one of each of them because they each have their own separate decks. We also introduced in the game new character-specific AI cards. So in the base game, the character that you were playing against didn't really make a big impact on how your game played out because they used the same exact deck. Most of the time, their character abilities are ignored. But the introduction of these character-specific cards to the AI decks was intended to give some flavor to that character so that your opponent actually plays differently depending on which character you choose as your opponent.
Wow.
I would like to ask you something about being a game designer.
Mm-hmm.
You are a well-accomplished game designer. You have a lot of game hits. And making games is your way of living. Mm-hmm. You still have as much fun playing as you used to, or the feeling is like I'm doing homework. Do you still play as a way to have enjoyment and to play?
Yeah. On the whole, I still definitely love playing games. I especially love playing games that I'm not currently working on because, yes, when I'm working on a particular game, maybe I've played that game 20, 30 times in the past couple of weeks. And so when it comes to the weekend and I'm meeting with my game group, I will want to play something else. But for the most part, I've loved every game that I worked on. Outer Rim is still one that I love bringing to the table whenever I can. Yeah, there are certain times in the week where it's like, oh, my brain is just so tired, I can't think through a game at this point. But otherwise, this job is a whole lot of fun most of the time. And certainly my love of games has not been diminished by it, but has probably even grown.
Wow, thanks. Nice, beautiful. It's we can see the love, the passion you put in the games. Until we see the games you have, the games are being released in Brazil and around the world. But in Brazil, I can tell you that people are feeling that when they are playing the games, and hopefully this game will be soon in Brazil as well. Mm-hmm. And thanks for sharing your ideas and how the game was created, and bringing us some what we can expect, because people here, the community, Latin America, Brazil, and Portugal as well, they're surely waiting for this new huge success, Star Wars.
Yeah.
Tony,
it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I always love talking about anything that I've designed, and I'm really excited for Unfinished Business to reach everyone.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. LePe?
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I'm sorry not being here in the first interview, but
yeah, it was great to meet you.
Keep designing, and we'll keep asking you to come here and talk with us.
It's a deal.
Ok. Galera do Inteligências Lúdicas, que temos o fabuloso Tony Fanchi, que está aqui nos contando esse lançamento incrível que é o Star Wars Orla Exterior, ou Outer Rim, negócios não terminados, Unfinished Business. E, galera, deixa um like aqui, se inscreve e aguarda que esse jogo, cara, vai explodir cabeças. Até mais.